Welcome to Business Live. I'm Mark Croskery in BL tonight. Before we get rolling, the big news, folks. Talk about the opposite of the language, the rhetoric, up to a couple of weeks ago when they were saying that if Biden won the US elections, or let's say President-elect Joe Biden Jr., that US markets would pull back, they would collapse, all the negative potential things. We'll talk about the opposite happening today. Dow Jones shooting up as much as 4 or 5%. Dow Jones hitting huge numbers, 30,000 points. So amazing things happening today, in terms of the US markets. American Airlines jumping, double digits. You're talking 15, 20, 25% in terms of, intraday trading. Lots of the sleeping blue chip stocks, that got really beaten up during the pandemic, doing so much better. Some of the tech market and so forth, and other stocks actually, pulling back, with not just President-elect, 46th US president, coming out, forming, let's say, advisor coronavirus, chief advisor coming out with statements, but Pfizer also coming out with big statement today. So both things kind of coming together, but very interesting, quite the opposite of the language a couple of weeks ago. And expectations, Dow Jones 4.65%, doing very well today. We'll see what happens over the next couple of days. So we wanted to really talk about that, highlight that in Business Live before we get rolling and running in BL tonight. So first up, we got Carreras Limited declaring a dividend. It's a nice dividend, especially if you analyze this, which typically you got to do if you're an investor in Carreras, multiply it by 4 or 4 quarters for this dividend. It's 17 cents Jamaican. The board of directors, they met on November 6, 2020, just the other day, and they declared Jamaican 17 cents per share. It's payable before Christmas. That's what we like to hear, folks. December 16th, 2020, ring that register, you get that check from Carreras. Now, Main Event Entertainment Group, not a company we've heard a lot about. That's MWEG, but coming out here, nice corporate action item. Everything looks normal, usual. Notice of their AGM, annual general meeting. Of course, they're going through a tough time right now. Not a huge amount of revenue. When you look at their last quarterly results, don't expect their current quarter to be excellent or awesome as it has always been. Understandably so, it is a pandemic, COVID, not a lot of events or, any events are keeping. So that's understandable. But for the AGM, it's slated for end November 30th, 2020 at 2:30 p.m. It's going to be held at 6 Altamont Crescent, Kingston 5. And it should be a doozy. It should be a great, event to go to. They are after all, in the entertainment, sector, so they should really put on a good annual general meeting. Tough times, but they should pull through. They should do well, once things normalize, get back to normal. That's anyone's guess whether that's going to be January or March of next year, but things will get back to normal at some point. This is probably just a long pause, and things will get back to normal, folks. Next up, we got Supreme Ventures, as ticker symbol SVL, making a huge move here. Senior management. We always say on Business Live, SVL, it's a company you can depend on every 2 weeks, 4 weeks. There'll be a corporate action item. PE or private equity group talk about it, in the JSE, jamstockx.com here. So this is well-known, Mr. Damien Duncan, well-known professional, well-known in terms of coming from the financial sector at NCB previously, now jumping into the seat here at the vice president, senior vice president level at SVL's wholly owned subsidiary, Prime Sports Jamaica, effective September 14th, 2020. So a bit of a late release, but better late than never. So this is good, interesting position here. So senior VP. Now, it goes on to say that Mr. Duncan carries to the company over 15 years of experience in finance and business management with a whopping MBA from Harvard Business School. So huge there. He's going to really focus on the strategy, pushing the business development and the growth of the organization. So Supreme Ventures, we carried it on Business Live, just wrapped up a private placement, 3 billion Jamaican dollars during the pandemic. That is a huge amount of funds. They have this gentleman now coming in with all this experience, the Harvard MBA, get that strategy pushing, get everything moving in the right direction, or more so, the right and bigger direction. Wisynco Group, quite the opposite here, but not bad results, just a bit of a dip, but revenues and profits hit by the pandemic in the first quarter. Quite the opposite of, let's say, Seprod and Grace. So interesting, some things potentially showing up here. Why is Wisynco slumping a bit here? And when we say slumping, meaning that the revenues, unlike Seprod and Grace, are not as good. So a bit off for the first quarter, which is a bit surprising. So revenues hit when we say that just slightly above $8 billion versus $8.58 billion for the first quarter. It's one thing to say net profits, would have slipped, but actually revenues for Wisynco, which would not be expected by the market or business life. No profitability falling to 871 million Jamaican dollars versus 1.175 billion. So quite a fall off there. But the financials make it clear. So does the management discussion analysis. Discontinued operations about 242 million. If you normalize that, it's not as bad. Still a bit down, but not as bad. Now the balance sheet, huge numbers here. Cash standing. Not many companies have this, even financial companies. $6.57 billion of cash. Talk about collecting those receivables at Wisynco, up 1.5 billion Jamaican dollars year over year. So that is a lot of money. 45 million US dollars. I mean, 6.5 billion Jamaican dollars. They can do a lot of stuff with that. Deals, organic growth, whatever they're going to do, but they can do a lot with it. But get those earnings going back up, revenue in the right direction going forward. Last up, this one, a little bit of a concern here, but the revenue is still trending up, but we'd like to see it in the profitability line item. Finance costs definitely hitting them. It's a company we spoke about quite a bit on Business Live a year, 2 years ago, really expanding, but we're not seeing it right now on the bottom line, which was what caused for concern. So this is MDS, ticker symbol, medical disposable and supplies, finance costs. That's the headline, folks, hitting the second quarter or the Q2 for MDS. Now it is a pandemic, it is COVID-19, so you got to understand this. So revenues continuing to grow and they seem to outperform market expectations. It's been a trend, as we said, for MDS over the past few years. So revenues, that's the positive. 630 million for second quarter versus 565 million Jamaican. For the 6 months, tapping into, this is for September 2020, 1.14 billion Jamaican. But the issue of finance costs, whopping 35.7 million Jamaican alone for the quarter versus 10.96 million a year ago. Now the losses, 6 million Jamaican for the quarter, 13 million for the 6 months overall. Not huge, but we don't like to see that. A loss is a loss. So they got to do a little bit better there. Figure out that finance cost, get those revenues to trickle down to the bottom line. We've been saying this a couple of times now over the past 6 or 9 months for MDS. Revenues are growing, but get it down to the bottom line, folks. I'm Mark Croskery. This is Business Live.